this meet?
Well, good afternoon, or just about early afternoon for you, I'm sure. Rocio Luevano, it's such a delight to interview you for this amazing book launch. Do you have your book, your copy with
I
you?
do.
Oh, da 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 da. This is a really beautiful privilege, and we should be, each one of us, really feeling good about this day where we brought a book we contributed to an incredible book. Is titled Amazing Woman, Divine Legacy, A New Era. Join the millions of women who are liberating the wealth of feminine prosperity to reshape their work, their relationships, wellness, and ultimately the world. So what
Yes.
inspired you, Rocio, to be a part of this?
Yeah. So yeah, I think it was a very organic process for me. Um, I I reached out to Marsh after completing a fellowship in Napa, and I it was a really enriching experience, and I knew that I needed to do something creative with what I had learned in that fellowship, but also bring in my lived and my life experience. I wanted to merge the two together. And so in working with Marsh, I discovered that I was able to do that and essentially share my message with other women about how sometimes our own experiences of trauma can be our most profound learning experiences as well. So I kind of wanted to bring that to the forefront in my chapter, and she did a beautiful job of guiding me through that process. So that's how I came up with my own voice and the message in my chapter.
Beautiful, beautiful. I wanted to read a little bit about your bio so people listeners can understand who you are and where you came from. Rocio Ortiz Luevano is a licensed clinical social worker, infant, family, and early childhood mental health specialist, Reiki practitioners, first generation Mexican American, and best-selling author. Though through neuroscience, spirituality, and her own personal story, Rocio encourages women to find their own strength and potential for inner healing. It is also thought through their own healing that they can powerfully create healing for their children and future generations. For over 20 years, Rocio has served and supported vulnerable mothers and very young children in the Los Angeles area who've experienced and been affected by trauma or adversity. Her aim has been to foster emotional healing and empowerment, as well as ending generational trauma for mothers and babies. Her hope is to help them unearth their innate capacity for emotional well being, as well as to help them discover healing through personal spiritual practices. Her vision is to help women who've experienced trauma or challenging situations to emerge, transform, and embrace their freedom, and simultaneously heal, protect, and create resilience for their children. How beautiful. So this
Thank
journey,
you.
what I found in working with so many authors as we've walked the journey together with many, many men and women both, is is that there's not one of us that don't have a story that we need to share with the world. And we've all had those incredible things that have happened to us that have shaken us to the core. And then we need to rise above it. And oftentimes by putting pen to paper and really sharing that with the world and then letting it go out to the world for the world to see is the biggest healing for ourselves. It's
Right.
quite a journey. So the name of your chapter is The Awakening of Divine Grace. Let's talk about that and what you mean by that.
Awakening of divine grace. So I feel like the main thread or the what comes through in the chapter is always the support and the guidance of, for me, Mother Mary. She's always been the inspiration, whether I've known this or not. And so I feel as though always in the background or present, her spirit, her strength has been with me. And so I feel like she's that divine grace that has supported me throughout my entire lifetime. And in writing this book, I feel like it's really her message, it's her light, her spirit that comes through and has supported me through all of my experiences, the challenges and the joys and all of the in between. So I feel as though she's been the main character in my story all along.
That's,
So I think that's where the name emerged from.
you do an incredible work in the world, something that um, where you're working, you're actually seeing these things firsthand, even from from little ones, just infants and mothers, and breaking that pattern is really truly important. I'm sure you could share a few experiences as to what that is like for you.
Yeah, yeah. So like you mentioned earlier, I supervise a program for at-risk moms and babies birth to 5. And it's a relatively new field because not too many people understand that it's really important to work with very young children whose brains are still developing, right? So they're like they're little sponges taking in all of this information, all of these experiences, and from birth to 5 is when we see the most growth. We see most of the neurons making connections and just growing tremendously. And it's also a very vulnerable and important time for children to, or actually for families and mothers to take advantage of that critical period to really support these children so that they can have the most optimal and healthiest experiences possible, right? And so in my line of work, we tend to um, work with a lot of moms who, unfortunately, and like many of us, have experienced a lot of adversity, a lot of trauma, um, socioeconomic disparities. So it's a really difficult. It's very difficult for these families, and so what we do during this time is we support them and we essentially try to scaffold and support and heal these moms, these mothers, these young mothers, so that they can be the best possible mentors and examples and change agents for these little ones, right? And so that's really our goal and our mission in this work, supporting these very vulnerable families so that they can have that light at the end of the tunnel and understand that in spite of the adversity, in spite of the difficulties, they're still able to create better life experiences for their children and also for themselves, right? So I feel like it's very, very important work, and we really need to dedicate a lot more resources to these younger populations, or maybe even not just mental health, but even supporting early childhood education, really supporting the teachers and the staff who work with very young children so that we can create the best possible environments for these little ones who eventually will be the future, right?
Right. That is amazing because, yes, the most impressionable years and the most formative years are those first 5. And if you can break that and you can change it so that they have a whole different experience and everything's been passed on so um, generationally, you know, and
Absolutely.
just keep passing it on and passing it on. And it's brilliant that you've been able to discover a way to really make a difference and maybe break the patterns.
Right, right. And I'm really excited or inspired about the idea of going beyond like the traditional psychotherapeutic approaches, right? That's what I learned in school. That's what most of my colleagues were taught. The psychodynamic, the cognitive behavioral, it's all very brain-based modalities. But I feel like the future is really about creating the somatic practices or spiritual practices that can create the healing for the children, for the mother, and like you said, maybe healing all of those generational traumas and generational patterns that we inevitably carry with us in our DNA. So I really feel like we're like in a very pivotal time where we can create some really uh, exciting and dynamic interventions and modalities to help people in general.
That is so beautiful. So what led
Mhm.
you to this kind of work?
I think, like most of us, it was my own personal healing. I um, I went through a very difficult first marriage, but I learned a lot from that. I went through my own therapy. I discovered Kundalini yoga. I discovered Reiki. All of the different spiritual practices that help to sustain us. And so I really hung on to that because it it just created such profound healing in my own personal life that I thought, this is something that um, should be shared with everyone. I, you know, I understand the value of traditional psychotherapy, but it wasn't until I merged the spiritual practices with the traditional psychotherapy that things started to really evolve and expand. Um, and so I think that's where I gained the excitement and the inspiration about the merging of traditional uh, psychodynamic or psychotherapy with these spiritual practices that really can make a profound impact on so many of us. And so that's also been like in the back of my mind. How do we, if this was so transformative and powerful for me, how can I not share this with others, right?
That is,
Um, yeah, and I think what's interesting too is that there's I see some of those common elements in some of the other stories in the book. The other authors also talk about their own spiritual experiences and how spirituality has created these profound changes for them. So I think that's also really exciting to see.
it's beautiful, and what brilliance on your part that you were willing to open your mind to a whole different way of um, a solution for different things and stepped into something that worked for you because we know that our spiritual practices are the things that can promote the healing and make a difference. And the very fact that you um, paid attention and could decide, well, this is what's worked for me, and maybe this is a way to take it further, and to impact our world in a different way. The work you're doing is amazing and so needed. I wish there was a lot
Thank
of
you.
them doing that.
Thank you, Becky. I think we're getting started. I think there's momentum being uh, developed at this point. More people are more open and curious about different modalities and different ways of healing. And I think people are really curious and receptive. And so I think it's a rich time for this growth and just for people to be more open-minded about other ways of healing.
Well,
Right.
I think that we've had it seen for years and years the same treatment or whatever, for handling these kind of situations, but we've seen over and over again where it hasn't worked. And so,
Right.
bringing this to the forefront is fascinating, and our world is changing because we're all having to find better ways to deal with situations. And incorporates specific practices that work for us as individuals. How do your coworkers feel about what you're doing?
Well, because I work for a government agency, it's a little bit hard for me to really bring this out. And I mean, I do talk about it. I have presented about my own ideas, but it's not something that I can just launch right at the moment. I have to be a little bit careful because of where I work. But people are really curious, and they're very excited about the possibility of incorporating practices like Reiki, or I think we've been doing the mindfulness. Like mindfulness is more of a an acceptable practice in the field of mental health, but I feel like Reiki is still something that's a little bit far out, a little woo woo, yeah. So so I'm being very cautious about how I present this to, at least in this field, or in the work that I do. But I think it really has the potential to grow and to really help a lot of people outside of the boundaries of this uh, this entity, I guess.
You have to walk kind of a tightrope there with it,
Yeah,
making sure
yeah,
you don't lose the ability to help others in the other ways that you do.
right, right.
Um,
Yeah.
you mentioned in the book, and just before you have this beautiful prayer. Today, I've come to realize that our life experiences, even those of great trauma, pain, and grief, can carry the greatest gift of transformation, expansion, and wisdom. That is so true. So when if somebody picks up this book and comes to your chapter, what do you hope they walk away with?
That's a really good question. Um, I would like for the reader um, to have that um, to think that even if they've experienced something very traumatic and challenging, I didn't mention this earlier, but in addition to having a really difficult first marriage, I recently lost my husband um, about 2 years ago. And so that experience really rocked me in spite of having all of these tools and practices under my belt. But I think what I want to share with others is that even after experiencing such a profound loss, like the loss of a husband, um, there's still we still have that ability to heal and to grow and to keep moving forward in spite of something as painful as that. Um, and again, I think it's the the ability to see the divine at work, or uh, the the potential um, for for spirituality to really lift us during those very difficult experiences. I feel as though um, my husband is actually with me even more so now in spirit than when he was here on earth. And so for me, that's it's a really beautiful relationship, I think, that I've developed with him at this point in time. And so that really gives me a lot of comfort and support, knowing that even though he's not here physically, I know he's with me. He's when and maybe this is what I need to work on. I need to work on being a little bit more quiet and present so that I could really listen to him. Um, but I really do believe that he's with me. Um, so to answer your question, I think it's uh, for others to know that even in the darkest of times, there's always that light and that possibility of beauty and healing and growth, in spite of anything that's happened. And it makes us stronger in the end, right?
Beautiful. Well, you're a remarkable human being, and hats off to you that you have the resilience and that tenacity to stick with it, and that the work you're doing in the world is and changing the trajectory for many young women and their children, and that is just remarkable. Hats off to you.
Thank, thank you, Becky. Thank you.
Well, I've enjoyed this interview so much. We could just talk and talk and talk, but I know you've got to get back to work. But for those that are listening, Divine, Amazing Woman, Divine Legacy is on Amazon right now and will be soon in all the online bookstores. Pick up a copy and read Rocio's chapter. I think you're going to be delighted with what you read. Rocio, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for taking this time with us today, and we so appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Becky. I appreciate you and the time, and this was really wonderful. Thank you.